My mother-in-law accused me of giving birth to a daughter instead of a son and beat me and threw objects at me when I was pregnant, and my mother-in-law accused me of infidelity because we were expecting a girl and then physically assaulted me. This will be a lengthy tale, so here it begins. My mother-in-law, Barbara, is 71 years old. She and my father-in-law, Richard, had my husband James later in their lives as a final attempt to have a child. My husband has a name like James Michael Johnson V, a name that has been handed down for literally generations. Additionally, it is noteworthy that no girl has been born on his side of the family for over 101 years. There is a long-standing joke that the men in his family cannot father daughters. Fast forward to our wedding day. Up until that point, I had a fairly good relationship with my mother-in-law, Barbara. The wedding was beautiful, with a lovely ceremony and humorous speeches. Everything was perfect until the end of the night as we were preparing to leave for our honeymoon suite. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Now go make us James Michael Johnson VI." I nervously laughed, and we departed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, over the course of our honeymoon, we indeed conceived a beautiful baby. And who would have thought it was a girl? Everyone was astounded when we announced we were having a girl. Most of the family did not believe it until she was born. That is when the nasty remarks began. Whenever my husband was not around, my mother-in-law Barbara and her family members would make snide comments like, "I wonder where she got that nose. It is definitely not from my son. For your information, as beautiful as my baby is, she is unmistakably my husband's child. She looks more and more like him as the first year passed, and even more so as she approaches 3 years old. As fate would have it, we are now expecting our second child, and yes, it is another girl." I pleaded with my husband not to tell my mother-in-law the gender when we found out, as I wanted to enjoy this pregnancy a bit longer before she spoiled it. I had kept the cruel remarks his mother made about our first daughter to myself. As she is old and in poor health, I felt guilty about potentially damaging their relationship, considering she might not have many years left. To clarify, my mother-in-law is not dying or anything. She has just been in extremely poor health her whole life. She smokes over a pack of cigarettes a day, eats junk food constantly, only drinks Diet Coke, refuses to exercise, etc. I once offered her water after she nearly passed out from walking 20 steps, and she gagged and said, "That is disgusting. Water makes me nauseous. Get me my Diet Coke." Anyway, my husband insisted on announcing the news during our next visit. And oh boy, as soon as she heard it was another girl. Tears welled in her eyes, and she started shaking her head and sobbing. She then began shouting at me, calling me names, and demanded I leave her house. My husband immediately stood up and began yelling at her, asking what her problem was, and telling her she needed to apologize to me and watch her language in front of her grandkids. She, through broken sobs, said, "Not ours, not ours. Those girls are not ours. She is a cheater." My son did not father those children. I started crying hysterically and picked up my daughter, who was utterly confused as to why her daddy was yelling at grandma, and her mommy was now crying. My mother-in-law then looked at me and started screaming, "I let you get away with it the first time I took you into this family. I allowed my son to believe he fathered that brat, but I will not allow it again." My husband was now absolutely livid. One thing to mention here is that while my husband James had always prepared himself for having a son, he was completely taken by surprise when our daughter was born. He never imagined he could love any girl in the world as much as he loves our daughter. He has made several comments over the past few years. A year and a half ago, my husband James said he never knew how deep love could go before he held our baby girl. I can assure you that if he had to save me, our daughter, or his mom, he'd save our daughter without a second thought. He gets extremely angry and starts screaming at his mother, telling her she is out of line and how dare she call his daughter names. He then says we are leaving, and until she comes to her senses, she will never see any of us again. She tries to say something more, but he cuts her off and yells, "By the way, Mom, I love that little girl more than I ever loved you." As he shuttles us out the door, I break down crying and tell my husband all the comments she and her family have made to me when he is not around. During the 2-hour drive home, he is furious at them all and is amazing in comforting me through it. We went no contact for several months, and everything seemed to be going great. We blocked her and Richard's phone numbers and hadn't heard from them except through other relatives on Facebook, which we either ignored or told not to relay messages from Barbara, or they would be blocked. When I was nearing my due date, we decided to be the bigger people and reach out to her and Richard, offering them a chance to make things right. She whined that she missed James and her granddaughter. We agreed to meet for dinner at their house after a few weeks for a proper talk and apology from her. We agreed that due diligence should not be present, so my sister was set to babysit. We arrived, dinner was served, and we were trying to make small talk when James said, "Yeah, Mom, this has all been nice, but we need to talk about what happened and the things you said last time we were here. I know, and you know, that you owe my wife an apology." Barbara then looks at James and says, "Yes, do you have the test?" James, "What test?" Barbara, "The paternity test. I am not apologizing until I'm proven wrong, and we both know I'm right. You cannot be the father, and the fact that you have now apparently made 2 girls is ridiculous." James, "What is wrong with you?" I start to cry and go to get my things and head to the car. Barbara, "Oh no, you don't." She shoots up, rounds the table, and grabs my shirt, then proceeds to scream at me. "How dare you try to run away from this? You're cheating and you need to own up to this problem." James screams at her to get her hands off of me and starts to make his way towards us. She then decides that I cannot be allowed to leave at any cost with her son. So she slaps me as hard as she can across my face. I push her arm away from me as I let out a scream from the shock of being slapped. James then gets in between me and his mom and starts to scream at her. He tells Richard to call the cops right now. Richard ignores him and tries to calm Barbara down, insisting that we can deal with this. James is furious and am crying hysterically. He grabs my hand, and we make our way to the door when Barbara grabs a snow globe from a shelf and throws it directly at me. It hits me right in the back of my head. It doesn't shatter, but does cut my head open. I fall to my knees from the pain, and before James can put together what just happened, she is grabbing anything she can find to throw in my direction. I'm on my knees on the ground, holding my head with one hand and my belly with the other, being almost 9 months pregnant, as a cascade of random items are being thrown at me. James is screaming at the top of his lungs for her to stop, and she proceeds to try to get close enough to kick me as hard as she can. Thankfully, she is old and in bad health, so she loses momentum quickly, and as a last resort, my husband pushes his mom and she falls back into a shelf by the front door and he rushes me out. I'm crying and freaking out and yelling she kicked my stomach over and over as he drives me to the hospital. I end up getting 7 stitches in my head and being monitored in the hospital for 5 days because she kicked my belly. The baby ended up being fine, and the hospital demanded we file a police report. We find out that when my husband pushed his mom into the shelf, she ended up breaking 3 fingers and is claiming the excessive force hurt her neck very badly. Richard called an ambulance for her, and she claimed that me and my husband assaulted her in her doorway after they refused to let us in for a free dinner. Cops showed up and took our side of the story, and compared our own report that we filed once at the hospital. They told us that Barbara is demanding to press charges against my husband for assault while we are pressing charges against her. So then my husband gets arrested, but then quickly released after Richard is forced to tell the truth, and Barbara then gets arrested for my assault. Richard is now begging us to drop the charges as no one was hurt. What I was hurt and my baby could have been hurt, and that we are being cruel to lock up an elderly woman. He insists that we drop the charges, say it was all a misunderstanding, and he puts Barbara in counseling. The thing is, because my injuries were documented in the hospital, we literally can't drop the charges even if we were stupid enough to do so because it was filed through the hospital. There's no way it can just go away. We are currently at home waiting for baby number 2 to arrive. I am on a strict bed rest order, and my husband has taken the week off work to help pamper me and take care of our older daughter. I asked my husband if once baby number 2 arrives, we get paternity tests for both girls to send to his mom in jail as a huge statement. He thinks it's a hilarious idea, and thinks we should also make copies and send them to all the relatives who were entertaining his mom's craziness, along with a written letter saying goodbye, that none of them will ever see us or his daughters again, and that he hopes they're all happy, knowing that they've ruined any chance they had to have a relationship with him or our children ever again. We are so thankful that our baby girl is okay through all of this, and so relieved that we decided against bringing our older daughter to their house that night. We can only imagine what could have happened had she been struck with something. My due date is currently 9 days away, and I have an appointment the day of to discuss induction if she hasn't arrived by then, and baby number 1 was a week overdue, and I had to be induced last time. Any support for us is wonderful and greatly appreciated. I will update if any more craziness happens in the future. Edit. I never imagined this would get so much attention and responses, so much so that the comments are at capacity. I have read most of your responses, and I want to thank you all for the kind words and support. I wish I could respond to everyone individually. The family who got a girl after several generations, and they took out a billboard. I envy the joy and pure welcoming this family got. For those of you with similar experiences, who had a girl after several generations, whose family was overjoyed, that actually makes me feel so good for you all, as it makes me realize that most families out there are wonderful, supportive people, and it makes my heart happy. Thank you so much, kind strangers, for the awards. Father-in-law is making Barbara's bail this morning, and she will be released from holding. We are going through with filing a restraining order and a no-contact order. They have to be 2 separate filings in my state. We will receive a court date within a few weeks, so we have time to prepare. My husband spoke with an attorney this morning, and the attorney mentioned that it would be a great idea to file for a paternity test through the court. It would be a lot cheaper this way, and there can't be any question about the authenticity. This way, it also won't be presented until it is used as evidence for the case. My husband has been nothing short of amazing. He is supportive and very protective of me and his girls, but I know he is having a hard time dealing with the emotions of his mother potentially serving a jail sentence. I really feel awful that this whole situation has happened this way. I feel guilt that maybe if I had done a paternity test with our first daughter when the mean comments started, then all of this could have been prevented. My husband thinks I'm being too hard on myself. He believes that I didn't cause any of this and is confident that Barbara would have caused problems no matter what. It's all about waiting for now, waiting for the baby to arrive, waiting for confirmation of the restraining order and no contact order, waiting for the court date, and waiting to see how much my hospital bill is going to cost us. My husband is out right now with our first daughter getting me breakfast and some snacks. I cannot tell you all how much I love this man and the family we have made. Family is what you make it. You don't have to settle for disrespect and seeking approval. He has made me realize how much he truly loves and believes in me at a huge cost. I feel so bad that he now views his mother as a despicable stranger, and I hope that me and the girls can continue to fill this new void for him going forward. I will update in a few weeks once our new baby is here and once the court stuff is done. Thank you again, everyone, for allowing me this platform for support. Update. So this is where it turns for the worst. We are home, and my husband has been a rock, very supportive and comforting to me the whole time. We went no contact with my mother-in-law and father-in-law, and I genuinely thought he was on my side. I had come up with the idea to do paternity tests on our girls and send them to my mother-in-law to get back at her, and it seemed like a great idea. We got in contact with a lawyer, and he suggested that we take the paternity tests through the court so we have it as evidence, and then the results couldn't be contested as fraudulent or fake. That sounded great, right? Well, over the next few days, my husband got more and more depressed. He started trying to get me to entertain the idea of minimizing my mother-in-law's actions and chalking up her behavior to old age. While I am aware that she is older, she's pretty sound-minded. I told him that she will be getting full screenings for her mental health when we go to court, and that while, yes, she's old, she doesn't get to assault me and accuse me of horrible things and use her age as an excuse. If she's found to have some mental issues going on, then I can deal with that. But that doesn't mean I ever want to be around her or have her around my kids. A few days go by, and I'm nearing my induction day because baby girl isn't making her entrance. I find out that my husband has been talking with Richard and Barbara behind my back. We get in a big fight, and he tells me that he still wants his mom to meet her granddaughter and that we can put this aside until the baby is here. Then afterward, once she's gotten to meet her, we can resume the legal issues. I am crying at this point as I thought he was supporting me through this, but in reality, he caved in less than 4 days to his mom. I reminded him that we have put in for a restraining order and no contact order, and that he has now broken it by contacting them. His response: "Well, the no-contact order is issued to you, not me, and the restraining order hasn't been approved yet, so mother-in-law can come meet baby girl number 2 before we get approved without breaking any rules." All I could do was shake my head and cry. I put my foot down and said absolutely not, and I couldn't believe he'd let his mom around me or the baby after she could have killed one of us. He said that I was overreacting as the baby was not injured and she wasn't actually trying to hurt the baby, just me. What? She kicked my very pregnant belly repeatedly after she threw a snow globe at my head. We got in a huge fight about me not forgiving her, holding grudges and being unreasonable, and eventually he just left. Where did he go? Yep, his mom's house a few hours away. He then called me sobbing and told me that if I could see his mom right now, I'd understand. Apparently, when he pushed her while she was assaulting me, he indeed broke 2 of her fingers, and she sprained her neck when she fell back into a shelving unit. She's laid up on a sofa in her living room, can't walk, and is in a severe depression. I should feel awful, according to him. The least I could do is let her meet her new grandchild and then figure out where to go from there. I'm so infuriated at this point because not only has he retreated to his mom's house, he left me alone with our oldest daughter, who is 2, while I'm supposed to be on bed rest with stitches in my head and an 8-pound baby in my uterus who refuses to come out, and I am so exhausted. He doesn't come home for the next 4 days until I'm supposed to check into the hospital for my scheduled induction. My sister comes to watch my oldest daughter, and my husband takes me to the hospital for the induction. We get set up, and they are poking me with things, shoving arms up where they don't belong, pumping me with Pitocin, and waiting to see if the baby will come. He mostly sat in the room on his tablet, as I was admittedly pretty cold and grumpy with him still, and wasn't acknowledging him very much. Finally, I started making progress with labor, and things were going well. The baby was starting to move down, and I was nearing the point where I needed to push. He did end up putting his tablet away and trying to get more involved, and at this point, I wasn't going to push the support away, as I was literally trying to push a baby out of me with no drugs. Finally, the baby started to crown, and my husband looks at the baby's head, looks at the nurse standing next to the doctor, and asks, "When do you do the paternity test?" I stopped mid-push, looked at my husband, and screamed, "What the heck?" The nurse was silent, looking back and forth between me and my husband. The doctor then looks at my husband and says, "Sir, we are here to deliver and take care of babies. If you have other personal relationship issues, you need to figure that out afterwards. We focus on baby and mom. This is not the place to ask questions like that." I immediately start crying hysterically and babbling stuff like, "It's not like that, it's his baby, his mom is crazy," and stuff. I am so mortified at the thought that these nurses and the doctor now think there's a chance my baby isn't my husband's, and there's no way I can explain the situation to them. I immediately felt judged by the nurse and couldn't help but feel like I had been robbed of a beautiful moment. My mind completely shut down, and the short time between crowning and when the baby comes out ended up taking an extremely long time because of how distraught I was. I was so angry at my husband. I asked him how could he do that to me? How could he ask that in front of the doctor and nurses when he knows it's his daughter? And it was my idea to do the tests in the first place. After the baby came out, I just held her, and she was beautiful and perfect. But I was so distraught I couldn't look at my husband. I hate to admit this, but I wouldn't let him hold her. I was just so angry. He left, and when he came back about an hour later, he said that his mom wanted pictures of the baby, and he took out his phone. I smacked it out of his hand. He got angry and left. My sister had to pick us up from the hospital and took us home 2 days later. In my state, you have to take the baby back in 2 days after being home to do tests and a checkup to make sure the baby is maintaining weight and that there are no obvious signs of neglect. So we took her in for the check and then went to a clinic to do the paternity test the same day. The next few days at home were awful. I couldn't even look at him, and he avoided being around me or the baby for days. He barely even looked at her and was practically ignoring our oldest daughter. We got in a fight because I was trying to breastfeed the baby, and my oldest daughter was crying because Netflix wasn't working. I started crying because I was so overwhelmed, and he just looked at our daughter and said, "Mommy didn't pay the Netflix bill because she's mad at Grandma." I yelled at him to not say things like that to a child. He said he just thought I didn't pay it because his mom uses our account at her house. I just forgot to pay it. It had nothing to do with that. He made several comments to our daughter over the next few days like, "Daddy's going to go see Grandma. You can't come because Mommy hates Grandma." Then he would leave me with a hysterical 2-year-old and a newborn. I'm not going to lie, I know that I'm dealing with crazy hormones and this is a horrible patch, but I seriously considered telling him I wanted a divorce right then and there. He left and I tried my best to cool off, but I couldn't. I've actually convinced myself that I want a divorce over his behavior. Am I going crazy? Is this enough to seriously consider leaving him? We got the results for the paternity test 3 days later, and for anyone who ever doubted me, y'all can ride with my mother-in-law to Crazy Town. Hez the father. He cried and told me he never doubted it and that he knew he was the dad. I told him that we would do a second test on our oldest daughter and that I was going to start packing our stuff and move in with my sister. He bawled and said he didn't need one for our oldest daughter. I demanded we take one as I would want it as proof for court whenever we get to have my case heard. I told him that I never cheated on anyone in my life, including him, and how much it hurt me that he said that in the hospital room and made the nurses and doctors think he doubted our daughter at all. He tried to apologize and hug me, but I pushed him away and told him he should leave while I packed up some things. My oldest daughter, my baby, and I are now staying at my sister's house, and he has told me that he refuses to take the second paternity test for our oldest daughter and is going to make his mom write out a very long apology letter to me. He wants me to come home, but I just can't even look at him the same. I feel like all the love I had for him has been ripped away, and I feel so angry towards him. I'm just trying to take care of our girls, but he won't stop calling me. I told him he can see the girls anytime he wants, but he can't take them near his mom, and she is not allowed to be around them at all. I'm going to give myself a few weeks to sort out my feelings, but is this not enough to justify a divorce? I don't exactly want to go through with a divorce, but I really just can't even look at him the same, and I don't know how I could ever get past this. Update. My ex-husband and I have been divorced officially for 22 months. Our marriage imploded after our second daughter was born because his family had a weird obsession with boys and implied I cheated because we had girls. Everyone made it clear that girls were inferior, and he sided with his family after they verbally and physically hurt me. That's putting it lightly, but that's the gist. He's been with his new girlfriend for about 6 months and only sees our girls once every week or so. After we divorced, I got really close with a long-term friend from college. He told me that he always had feelings for me, but we were always in relationships with other people, so the timing never worked out. Well, fast forward, and we've been dating for 16 months, engaged for 4 months. He proposed on our 1-year anniversary. He's known my girls their whole lives. It's been a long time since I've been this happy. Well, I am 16 weeks pregnant, and we just found out that we are having a baby boy. I haven't told my ex-husband yet and just kind of figured he'd get the idea when I'm visibly pregnant. We will start telling the girls in the next few weeks. I know I obviously have to address the situation with my ex. I know he's going to ask if we are having a girl or boy, and I am unprepared for how he will react about the baby being a boy, or, more realistically, how to navigate the situation when he does eventually find out the baby is a boy. I guarantee his reaction will be bad. I just don't know if it's better to announce that we are having a boy now or after he's born. My sister says to not tell anyone the sex and say we are waiting till birth to be surprised, but all my mom friends are saying to announce it now so he has a few months to process his feelings about our daughter's new sibling. Husband's update: full disclosure, I messed up bad. I know that 2 years ago, my ex-wife and I welcomed our second daughter into the world. My mom put thoughts into my head about the paternity of my girls shortly before her birth. In my family, only boys had been born on my side for several generations. I thought my parents and my now ex-wife got along well, but it all exploded when we were expecting our second daughter. My wife told me that my mom had been implying that she cheated for a long time and making nasty digs at her when I wasn't present, but she didn't tell me because she thought I'd side with my mom. In hindsight, she was actually right. I did let my mom get to me, and my relationship exploded. I went through a terrible time where I wasn't being a good dad. Every time I'd see my girls, I'd find things that would convince me they weren't mine. I went to stay with my parents after a nasty fight between my wife and my mom. I know it was a huge mistake, and it ultimately ended my marriage. My wife insisted on a paternity test to prove it, and I just knew then there was no way she cheated. I begged her not to do the tests, but she was adamant. After the test, she told me that she just couldn't look at me the same after I sided with my mom, and she just didn't love me the same way anymore. I went down a spiral and refused the divorce and said if she hated me that much, I'd just sign away my rights to the kids and she could go be a single mom if she felt that way. I know that was wrong. We did get divorced 3 months later, and it's been 2 years. I see my girls every weekend and pick up the oldest from daycare 3 days a week. Things have gotten a lot better, and I feel like we have a good co-parenting relationship going on, but there's this wall that she keeps up around me. My ex-wife is engaged to the guy she's been dating for a year, and I've been seeing my new girlfriend on and off for 7 months. I just found out that my ex-wife is pregnant. I asked if she knew the gender yet, and she said yes, it's a boy. This is me ripping the Band-Aid off. If you need time to process, I understand, she said with zero emotion, and walked inside with our daughters and closed the door. I feel like I'm watching a bad movie play out where some guy gets to play house with my family, and I'm a total outsider. My girlfriend has been talking about marriage and kids, and I'm nowhere near ready to even think about that with her. I'm starting to feel like I want my old life back. I got really drunk last night and tried to call my ex-wife, but she didn't answer. I'm glad she didn't because I would have said some really stupid stuff. Take me back. Let's give our family another chance. I'd even take on her new baby as my own, etc. I know it's pathetic, and I know this is all my fault. I just don't know how to go about this. I have to pretend I'm okay with this. I don't even know how I can interact with her without spilling my heart and desires. I cut off my mom 8 months ago and was brutal when I did so. She knows that I regret ever listening to her nonsense, and she's no longer a part of my life. It was her or my kids, and I chose my kids. You all act like I dropped my girls off on the side of the road. I'm still actively involved with my children. I'm looking into therapy, but you guys act like a shrink will make me magically stop loving her. Signing out for a while because some of you are huge jerks. Thanks.